And here we go. Welcome back to the second part of our evening, the Q&A. Let's get everybody back up on stage. I'm gonna put Douglas on and Christine. Not seeing Graham and Christine.
There he is.
Oh, there he is. Great. Okay, so let me pop that first question in, and we'll give it some because it's a question that we get asked in our strategic planning retreats because we're all about 15 to 30 years old, and people get cross-eyed as soon as we say that. And we tell them about Grace Kennedy and Douglas, and they still get cross-eyed. But here's the question in the chat, and here's the question in the Q&A. Can you guys see that? How do you convince your key stakeholders that planning 5, 10 years into the future is absolutely the right thing to do, even in all these uncertain times?
Okay.
Question by Glenn Freckleton.
So when do you want us to answer that?
Right now.
Oh.
It's a good.
Okay. So is everybody hearing us? Whoever is on?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right. So here is one way I would suggest to do it. In each stage in my career, especially as I got older, and certainly when I launched the 2020 vision, I had an idea of where I personally wanted to be in 5, 10, or 15 years' time. The question to ask each person is, have you developed your own personal long-term plan? So first of all, do you know where you want to be in your career in 5, 10, 15 years' time? And most importantly, when you retire, so you don't say to people at age 59, I don't know where to live and I'm retired next year and I don't have a pension. These are really fundamental issues that individuals need to think through. Because if you have that plan, you can do something else that's very important. You can say, how does that plan fit with my company's strategy? Because especially in later years, people would come to me and say, Doug or Mr. Rain, this is what I want to do with my life. Does it fit in with Grace Kennedy? And it allowed us to have a candid conversation about, yes, it would or not. But the reality is, even if it doesn't fit in within the next year or 2 or 3 or 5, they would be developing the experience and creating value for our company that will benefit them when they go to the next stage in their lives. So they may want to start their own business. They may want to migrate. They may want to go into academia and teach. Who knows? But have your own personal plan. Don't depend solely on your boss to develop your personal long-term plan for you. So get out a piece of paper now, and as soon as this webinar is finished, start writing down where you want to be in the year 2030.
This is the other thing I would say is that, talking about a 5 or 10-year plan can be very sort of abstract for a lot of people. But I think our role as leaders is to create a vision in their mind that this is in the mind of the people, the organization that you're leading, about what might we look like in 10 years in a way that is much more tangible. So for example, let's just say in the Grace case, it might be that you could buy a Grace product in every street corner in New York City, for example, or something that is easier to touch or feel or understand. And then you get them excited behind a vision, a new state, an evolved sense of being, and then your strategic plan, is really the nuts and bolts behind that. But I think you have to have an end game or an end point that is somewhere people want to be.
Yeah, I agree with both, and particularly illuminating. I'd probably say the way in which I've gone about it is by soliciting and engaging to get buy-in throughout the organization. Because in the organizations that I've been a part of, they're comprised of divisions, which comprises of businesses, which comprises of functions, which comprises of operations. So the key activity for me is to make the planning process not just a top-down process, but a bottoms-up process. But getting individuals to start to plan for their particular area. Because not everyone can plan for an entire large company, such as a Stanley Black & Decker, but they can plan for what's important for them. So doing the both, getting the bottoms-up planning, the top-down vision, and once you're finished and having that comprehensive plan, articulating what it means for them. What it means for them, whether personally, what it means for their business, and trying to be as clear and succinct as possible in that regard. And in some of the businesses I've been part of, we've used something called the X Matrix, or other organizations have used it for lead management, to really take a long-term aspirational vision to something which is tangible to businesses or operations that they can really act on, and thereby generating much more buying.
I would add also that the companies that we've done these 15, 20-year futures with benefited because we forced them to look beyond the horizon over to what would happen as a result of their intentions, not just what was predicted, but what future they actually wanted. And in many cases, what COVID has done is to just basically bite 5 years out of their 15-year plan. So now it's a 10-year plan, because what people are saying is that more change has happened in the last 6 months than happened in the last 10 years or the last 15 years. So what they've benefited from is having an acceleration of the plan that they had, because it's an unintended, unplanned surprise acceleration, but it actually, the discipline of creating this 15, 20-year plan meant that they'd already thought through the future. They already thought through what a digital transformation would look like. They didn't anticipate it happening this fast, as I said. But now all they need to do is just leapfrog and put in place the plan that they had for 2025 this year. So by having that detailed plan, they're able to not flounder, but actually just kind of go in there and jump. And that's one of the benefits. Any other comments or responses?
Well,
add to that before go
I
ahead.
would just amplify what you said in two dimensions. One is, while I was at Honeywell, you came, so probably about 2 years ago, and did that exact session with us in terms of long-term planning, and really took us from the comfort zone of the 5-year strategic plan to the 20-year, which proved to be particularly beneficial. The second thing, though, is when I joined Samsung in Korea, I joined a group called the Global Strategy Group, which gave advice to the executives. And we started developing a 5-year plan, and I thought that was so great. And then they came back and said, oh, well, what we normally do is a 100-year plan at Samsung. So I said, okay, well, I mean, not sure I'm ready to step there. But that's what they did when they started Samsung. And if you look at the plan they developed then, it's actually pretty eerily similar to where they're going as a company. So I think your point of really going outside of the comfort zone is a really, really good one.
Well, okay. The next question is from Kyle Stewart. How do you address the concerns around job security in these uncertain times? I feel employees' anxiety levels are heightened and it affects their productivity.
Well, I'm retired, so I'll wait for the other two who are active on the front line, and then I'll give my thoughts.
That's a pun.
What we tried to do at Chucky was retain as many jobs. We pretty much retained all jobs, except we put everybody on much reduced hours. So that, at least they got something, not nothing, and people weren't completely on the breadline. The reality is that you can't give any promises, and you basically have to say, we're all in this together and we're working hard, all of us, to secure the best possible outcome. But very difficult times to give any sense of job security.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's where you have two bad options and choosing the least worst. The thing you have to do is to be pretty transparent about the situation that you're in. At Stanley Black & Decker, when I started 3 months ago, or 3.5 months ago, we started with reduced work weeks and furloughs as a way of preserving as many jobs as possible. Today, we announced with our earnings that we are taking a step back and moving more towards permanent cuts as the COVID-19 situation gets deeper. But what we did and what we continue to do is to be very, very transparent about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and the criticality of it in terms of preserving the long-term stability of the company, of which it benefits everyone, because there's no point in having a great company which doesn't exist if we don't adjust the cost structure in a timely manner. So being transparent, being honest, and being clear as to what you're doing and why you're doing it, I think are probably the best things you can do in these circumstances.
Here's what I would suggest. Always find a way to be marketable for the next set of jobs in the future. So in this turmoil, what I would do is to find ways to educate myself, use whatever resources are available to develop new skills, from technological skills like in the digital world to soft skills like how to cope with anxiety and stress, so that no matter what gets thrown at me, I'm able to come through and survive and thrive, because you can't guarantee that your job will be there. And I see this as a big opportunity in the digital field. Look, there's so much. I spend a lot of my time talking to fifth and sixth formers, and I'm amazed how few of them in Jamaica are using podcasts and other educational sources to educate themselves, to learn the sciences, maths, foreign languages, history, geography, which will give them an advantage, not only in the world of work, but self-satisfaction and the ability to create new businesses for themselves. And so that's one of the things I think we need to encourage folks to do. Jamaica has one of the highest penetrations of cell phones in the world. It's 110%. That means that more people generally have more than one cell phone, smartphone. So let's use it as individuals at every level to educate ourselves for the future. That's what I am doing. I never knew how to do virtual meetings until 3 months ago, but I tell you, they're a lot more productive than driving for an hour and 20 minutes and getting irritated in traffic and sitting down with a bunch of people and then heading back again. So there's actually been a big increase in my productivity and others. And there's one other advantage, I would say. It gives us the opportunity to more closely bond as families, because in crises like this, having myself studied how other eras, like going back to the Middle Ages with the bubonic plague, how did people get through it? It's families that pull through together. It's not individuals alone, and this is a way to rediscover the power of families helping each other to get through this period.
Yeah,
The other thing I would say is that I recently attended a Harvard Business School seminar on new ventures that were sort of hot, having a lot of potential post-COVID. And when you listen to, for example, one whole sub-segment being networked industry. So, for example, like a Pinterest, right, which would start with, interest boards and then just become this massive networked, scaled up business. And when you think of it, you used to have a lot of capital and a lot of human resources and being situated in a first world country to start these type of businesses. Why can't somebody from a desk in the Caribbean start one of these? It's almost as if the barrier are lower in some instances. and easier to get involved in some of these global businesses than it was in the past.
It's true. There's a friend of mine, Lloyd Carney. He's an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. He said WhatsApp could have been invented in Jamaica by 4 young graduates from UTech or UE, because he knows the 4 people who invented WhatsApp in San Francisco. And they're not techies, they aren't geniuses, but they just spotted an unmet need, which is that a lot of people wanted to get free text messages worldwide. And ironically, Jamaica was one of the first early adopters of WhatsApp because the demand was so great. So it could have been us, you're right. So let's see how we get the next one to do it. But you require certain ingredients in order to generate, to move from new ideas to successful startups, because you need the ideas and you need a group of people who are supportive of young people and don't discourage them and say, why are you idiot, man? Why are you talking about? You know, that kind of, we have to cut out that nonsense of how we speak to the younger generation. And then you need a supporting group of angel investors, venture capitalists, mezzanine investors who will carry businesses through to the point where they can list on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. And I believe in Jamaica, we're very close to that in terms of creating that ecosystem. One of the reasons is because I participate in it myself. By the way, that's one of the advantages of retiring early. I don't have the time to do that. And also it gives the younger generation the opportunity to spread their wings and carry us further at a faster rate. I'll keep quiet at this point.
I think the 3 of us.
Just one comment in terms of our lobbying to our governments. You know, when you look at the trend in Trinidad and Tobago, there's been a rise in the percentage of subsidies and transfers going to the population, and a decline in the percentage of the population that is being employed. And we you know, the more that we give and transfer, is the less people really have to, you know, have the necessity be the mother invention. You know, we can't have that happen. So
right,
we all have a role to play in that.
Right. Along those lines, to answer the question about what can companies do to handle the anxiety, I remember being really impressed by one company that was about to do layoffs, and they had their HR coordinate essentially job training for people who needed to find work outside of the company. So people who were being laid off, they thought far enough ahead that they said, okay, here are the skills that they're going to need in the open market. And they started to train them. They said they need financial planning skills. So they started to provide them. They needed resume writing skills, but then nobody had anything to do with LinkedIn. This is a few years ago, but people were anxious, not only because they're losing their job, but because their skills from their perception weren't valuable on the open market, and they didn't know how to find a job, just the basics. So this company put in place this whole capacity building for employees who were about to be separated, so that the anxiety, even if they got separated, they could say, well, I've already started my own business on the side. Now, there are many companies who wouldn't want to invest in that, but it's one way to reduce the anxiety. And I think people who are treated that way are not only thankful, but those who survive respect the company for taking care of those who had to leave. We have 2 more questions, so I'm going to bump over to the first one. I'm a board member of a financial institution. What key questions should I be asking management in these times?
Well, I'm also a board member of a financial institution. I think the biggest issue with financial institutions right now are trying to come to grips with your estimated or expected credit losses. So really understanding the sectors, to where the softness is, what the likelihood of default is, what the magnitude of the default is versus what you have security against, and coming to grips with that expense and providing for that expense, as soon as possible.
Well, I think there are a couple of questions to ask. The easier ones are our risk management and control systems robust and in place? And have you checked them regularly to make sure that is so? But the other question is a more fundamental one. What are the risks that you haven't thought of yet that exist out there? In other words, the black swan events. And you have to search real hard to find them, but you can't. How many people thought a pandemic like this would sweep the world? Well, 99.9% of the population never thought of it, but there is 0.1% who have been concerned about this for years and warned us and actually put in place systems in some countries to protect against SARS and Ebola and other things that depressed or basically reverse the spread of those viruses. So it's a tough question, because how do you know what you don't know? But you have to keep on pressing to ask those questions in order to protect yourself in that regard. Also, it's human nature to try and avoid the toughest questions of all. You said, I don't even want to think about it. It's too painful. But those are the very questions we need to follow through to the end in that regard. But the advice I give is ask all the questions you think that are stupid, because most of the people around the table wanted to ask the same questions but were too afraid to ask. So there's no such thing as a stupid question. So you, as a non-executive director, ask those questions that seem naive and maybe even uninformed, because you'll be surprised what you learn from asking them.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that is to make sure that the leadership team is asking their teams those questions also. Are they holding their teams accountable? Do they have
the manufacturing sector, talk to the tourism sector, talk to leaders, and really find out, what are their pain points, what risks are they seeing, what's the outlook for their businesses like. And it'll tell you a great deal of how a financial institution that, is a partner in those businesses will be affected.
Christine, the first part of your comment got cut off. All we heard was talk to your manufacturing, talk to your...
I was suggesting that talking to people outside of the financial institution,
okay,
and leaders of industry in which, the financial institution is a partner. So, as I said, whether it's the tourism sector, the manufacturing sector, talking to people and leaders in those businesses and how they see the outlook of their businesses, because that's going to affect the institutions that lend to them.
Gotcha. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, good point.
I don't like to rely only on what I hear in a boardroom. I like to do, a little due diligence around town too.
Definitely. You're right. Thumbs up to that. I believe in that, Christine.
Well,
yeah, what I was saying before was, insisting that, asking the questions to the people in the room, for sure, in the boardroom, but ensuring that they're asking their teams those questions also. And they're doing the diligence in the organization to ensure that people in the organization are probing and understanding what can potentially go wrong. And those scenarios are being played through the organization. So ensure that there's an accountability that is being led from the leadership team throughout the organization, because that can only benefit in terms of ensuring all the ideas are brought to the table.
One other thing I want to say is, I think that how financial institutions deal with their clients in this unprecedented crisis is going to drive their brand and what they stand for and their loyalty and market share in the future. And so I would want to understand, how are customers being treated when their back is up against a wall? And how, coming out of this crisis, am I going to remember my financial institution as somebody who was there for me or somebody who left me stranded? And I think that will determine my desire to continue a business relationship with them after all is, dust is settled and things are good again, which there will be.
I'll add to what you're saying. That I wrote an article the other day about board members that were mailing in their participation on different boards, not financial institutions because they tend to be regulated, but many boards that I've done work with. And I would challenge board members to up their own game. That if they've been not coming to board meetings, not doing the things they need to do as board members, if they've been slack or loose or mailing in their participation, that they need to be the most engaged, the most intellectually rigorous, to use Graham's term. They need to be the most demanding of themselves, not the least, because the organization will only be as demanding of itself as they are of themselves. So I'm adamant about that, and pasty and rude about them being the best that the organization has to offer, and they need to hold themselves to account at this new level if the organization is going to survive. But that's me and my face today. So here's the questions are getting harder. I hate to tell you, but so I'm staying in this mode because they're only getting more. So here we have a question from Derek. If you knew 3 months in advance about COVID-19 and the socioeconomic impacts, what would be the one primary thing you would do at your organization to adapt? Lord have mercy.
Who is that directed to?
All of you. Not me.
Okay. Well, I'll give one example, and it's actually in a school. So having retired, I'm a trustee of my alma mater, Wolmer's. As a group, we have been pushing very hard to get digital transformation, and it has been a long and slow process. There's actually a lot of resistance to it. So what we did, a group of us alumni got together and paid for 6 of the most senior people at the 3 schools, boys, girls, and prep school, to go to Atlanta for a week and to visit 11 schools to see how they've used digital transformation to improve learning and teaching. And it was an eye-opener. They came back as converts. And so as a result of that, from October of last year, we have been implementing a whole series of software systems, including Google Classroom. So when March 13th came and the Prime Minister said, lock down all schools, we were much better prepared than most schools to actually teach and learn online. Now, we didn't know about it before, but what it is really saying is there are a lot of things we talk about doing, and we're taking a long time to do it. We need to do it faster and more immediately, because we don't know what the future will hold. And also events are unfolding much more rapidly than they did in the past. So the time to respond is much shorter.
Yeah. In my case, there are twofold. One is if I were to go back 4 months ago when I was leading Honeywell Industrial Safety at the time, which comprises of the PPE division. If I knew what I knew then I'd have built the 2 factories from before that made masks, instead of waiting until afterwards to build the factories. And at Stanley Black & Decker, I would say that I probably would have turned the steering wheel even harder in terms of moving towards the adjacencies. We were in challenging end markets in terms of automotive, we still are, oil and gas, aerospace, and the move towards those adjacencies, we did. And while it's only been 3 months, in retrospect, I'd have moved even faster, because I think that the need to move with speed, and to move with agility, and to move with speed, and to move with agility, 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 is as critical as ever, and doing it doing it and getting the organization aligned to doing it and trained, generating that muscle is one that takes a bit of time. So turning the steering wheel even earlier and harder would have been something I have done.
Christine, are we hearing you? I see that. Yeah,
I think,
great. Go ahead.
yeah, you heard me. I think it just, I would probably have made the difficult decisions that we knew we had to make pre-COVID that just took too long to make. And COVID forces, in a lot of ways, COVID forced the iceberg, the water level to sort of decline and see more of the base of the iceberg. And I think that, um, I think back 3 years ago, and if I had a cost structure now, like
Mm.
if I had that cost structure that I have now 3 years ago, we'd have made so much more money that we would have been weathering the storm far more easily. So I think it's forced you to get really aggressive and really razor sharp.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, sometimes we need these crises to really, you know, get every little bit of fat out of the business.
yeah. And maybe just to add another point, because I mean, Douglas mentioned earlier in terms of probably being more productive now than before, not having to go through traffic. And I mean, as I mentioned, I started 3 months ago and I haven't met anyone in my team face to face. And it's all to Zoom, all through Zoom. And I really firmly believe that I am actually more effective now than I would have been pre-COVID. So I think what has happened with COVID, it has really, certainly, it's cliche to say, it's accelerated the transformation. But knowing what I know now, if I knew it 3 months ago or even 6 months ago, driving organizations toward that to take advantage of the technology in situations where it's just not productive to do otherwise, is something that I'd have really insisted on in a more systematic way.
And Graham, if I could just add to that and also, really support a point you made, Douglas. I could say that as a working mother, and I'm sure we are all working parents, the work-life balance that working from home has allowed me to achieve is unbelievable. Versus being out of the home
Mhm.
for 10 hours a day from morning to night and trying to keep in touch with what's happening at home. Whereas you have children, coming and going and drop to an extracurricular activity, come home, finish a piece of work, pick back up. You're much more face to face and in touch with your children, I think, on a day-to-day basis, and that can only bring good. And I don't think the productivity in the workplace is suffering in any way. And I think that's good for society.
Absolutely.
I would add to what you guys have said that I attended, or we facilitated our first retreat with a digital strategist, somebody who actually had the job of a digital strategist. That was a couple of years ago. And this fellow made a profound difference to the conversation that would have happened if he weren't there. And we started pressing boards and management teams to include someone who was digitally savvy. We didn't have much luck, frankly. The mindset was still, well, IT, and we have an IT manager and he fixes the laptops. And that was the extent of their digital thinking up until I, I think that's changing now. But if it's one thing I would recommend is to hire someone or develop someone from the inside who has digitally strategic skills, who's thinking about the application of technologies in the future and is anticipating them and is helping the organization to accustom itself to what's going to come. Because it's a very, very strange, and well, it was a strange tool set for somebody to have. But now it seems like without that person, who knows what you do. And the last question that we have is actually tied into what Douglas said about the schools. And someone said, isn't it time, this is Sharon, isn't it time to introduce financial education and entrepreneurial skills into the basic curriculum of primary and high schools? They are not being adequately prepared for the real world in a timely manner. And boy, so I agree with that. I think our graduates, with the exception of Wilmot, right, Douglas?
Yes, that's correct.
Right? But our graduates are not leaving high school or even college for that matter with the kind of skills that they need to thrive in the times that we are currently in. And some of these entrepreneurial skills, like what's it called? The entrepreneurial program in high schools.
Well,
Oh,
there's a course called entrepreneurship. CAPE. It's at sixth form level. I don't know
okay.
if that's the
Okay.
one you're referring to.
Young. Uh, the name slips me, but the one I'm thinking of actually is it's an evening program where you start a company,
Oh,
junior
okay.
achievement,
Yeah.
junior achievement. You actually start a company. You have a P&L, you have an accountant, you have a marketing person. You actually create a small company, and you actually sell a product or a service, and you generate revenue. But it's a hands-on entrepreneurial program. It's not in every school, I know, but I could imagine it making. I wish I had it. That's bottom line. I would have loved something like that when I was in school.
You know, Francis, I think anything we can do to encourage more entrepreneurship in young people is absolutely critical. And it's not just the skills, but it's seeing entrepreneurial role models, having guys go in and talk to them, and women that have been successful, you know, starting their own businesses or working in business. And that they see that there's a path to success that is not that is not, you know, less than desirable. I think there's and even just giving them the confidence that, look, this is possible and you can be that person too, is just absolutely critical.
Right, right, right. And on that note, we have about 6 minutes well, 6 minutes to eight, and our formal proceedings end at eight. But this might be a good time for passing shots, last words of wisdom. The the recording seems to be working, so this will probably all be recorded and rebroadcast. But do you guys have any passing last words of wisdom for those who will be listening in the future, or those who are currently on listening right now?
Well, I wanted to give the answer to the case, which is that we started 25 years ago and we are now at 2020. So, how was Grace Kennedy actually done in terms of executing? Can I get 2 minutes?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right. So here are the outcomes for what we actually achieved. We doubled productivity by the year 2000. We made the target. So it's like people saying, "Oh, you're penguins. Penguins can't fly," and we were there waving at them and saying, "Oh yeah, that's what you think. Here we are up here, and we are flying." The next one is that we bought the Grace brand worldwide, and it gave us a tremendous platform to move forward in that regard. And by the way, I saw the question somebody asked about Grace products are expensive in Cleveland, Ohio. One of the things we did was very careful, detailed market research, and our market segment that we focus on are people who care about their families and their families' bodies, and say, I am going to put the most wholesome food I can find and trust into my body and my family's body. That's a different segment from people who say, me just want something cheap to fill my belly, you know. So there are different market segments, and we need to be clear. We are clear whose unmet needs we're satisfying, and it's obviously worked in that regard. And maybe I should give you some figures on that. So I said our revenues in 1995 were 303 million US. 2019 there were 768 million. So that's more than double. Profit after tax was 10 million in 1996. Last year, there were 33 million US. I'm giving it in US in order to take inflation in Jamaica out of it. And the one that is really the big surprise to most people. Our market value, that is the value of our shares times the number of shares issued, 36 million US in 1996, $533 million in 2019. And the peer, so what, and remember this, Grace Kennedy has had a philosophy from its very inception to encourage all of our employees to buy shares in the company, and we have a very active stock grant and stock option scheme. So therefore, employees benefit not only by earning salaries and incentives, but also by being shareholders. So it has worked. And also, as an example, the Grace brand is exported to over 30 countries. We're hardly exporting in 1995, 96. Grace Kennedy Money Services represents Western Union in 11 countries in the Caribbean. So it shows we have expanded in a way that most people would have said was impossible 25 years ago. But there's one fundamental issue that I think is most important. The execution taking place now is not by me. It's by the younger generation who I was fortunate enough to help to groom, and then I stepped aside and let them move forward a decade ago. And they are the ones executing very successfully now in that regard. And at the same time, remembering and reinforcing the Grace Kennedy mantra even more effectively, which is honesty, integrity, and trust. Because once people believe that, then they want to buy your products and services and know you stand behind whatever you say. There's one final point I would make, and that is we developed from 1995 the direction to benchmark to the best companies in the world, not necessarily to our competitors in Jamaica, because we wanted to be up there with the best in the world. And it has proven to be a very powerful technique in that regard. So one of the things I encourage business people to do is to look outside, and the internet is incredible. We never had it in 1996. We had to do it with hard copy material or to travel overseas to get that information. Now we can get it in 30 or 60 seconds to see what similar companies are doing elsewhere in the world. And I do it all the time, and I tell you one of the places I go to a lot, and that is Asia, to see what is happening in Asia, in India, Southeast Asia, because there's so much innovation taking place there. It's not necessarily looking to the US or the UK any longer to find best practices. Thank you.
Great, great. Christine and Graham, you have anything to add to those powerful closing words?
No, I just wanted to say that, as Caribbean people, we really need to figure out what industries we really can have a global competitive advantage. And I think they exist. And then we just need to drive value creation there and, take our region to the next level.
Absolutely.
And I'll just conclude by saying thank you. Thank you, Francis. And it's really been a pleasure for me to participate in the panel. I do a lot of speaking, but I never get to speak often with people from the Caribbean. So this has been a distinct pleasure and somewhat of an honor for me. I'll just conclude by how I started, which is, our job as leaders is to do these two seemingly conflicting things at the same time, which is to determine how we reap the rewards and to drive near-term growth, yet at the same time plant the seeds for long-term growth. And it's not easy, but it is critical. And to keep the focus on doing both.
Great. So the evening is not over. While it's 8 o'clock and our formal proceedings are complete, we're actually going to be flipping over into networking mode, where if you want participants to ask any of the presenters, they may stay around for a few more minutes and maybe they'll answer a few questions. It's 9 o'clock in Trinidad, so I know it's late for Christine and it's late for Graham up in Connecticut. But if you can grab them to ask them a few questions, we'll be chatting and hanging around until at least 8:30 over there in um, conversation mode, or I'm going to share a screen, or networking mode. Just that when you go over, make sure to click at the bottom of the screen to turn on your camera and your microphone. And you'll just do that by clicking that red button at the bottom of your screen. So we'll flip over in a minute. Before we do that, I want to thank our presenters, our panelists, for an awesome, stimulating evening. I could imagine easily going on for another, basically, because you guys are so resourceful, you're so smart, and you're so generous with your time. Frankly, you shocked me by saying yes to tonight, because I didn't think my first choices would come through, but you were my first choices, and you all agreed so readily. You've just been amazing, and thanks for all of your help. On behalf of the participants, thank you for sharing the insides of your experiences, and thanks for being so honest and available to us. We really appreciate it. And I'm gonna stop the recording here, turn off the sharing, and then we'll flip over to conference mode, and you'll see different tables. To change tables, just double click around and you can chat with anybody that you want. See you all. Take care. See you in half a
Bye.
second.